Let us enter into worship with the words of John Saxon. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night, in times of hope and despair. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name and has many different names. The Spirit of life, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you and to me. It's calling us to greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, greater love. It's calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves, in others, and in the world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and dance and sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. It's calling us into community. It's calling us into the greater life of all. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. Come, let us worship together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to join our voices in our opening hymn, number 1003 in the Teal hymnal, Where Do We Come From? A gentle reminder that our COVID guidelines ask us to mask while singing.
Sure that person
Please remain standing for the lighting of the chalice.
was born at 10,000 feet.
Lights our chalice with words inspired by Karen G. Johnston. What if when I light the chalice, you hear an invitation to welcome gratitude for the earth? This week, as I got ready for the chalice lighting, I thought about blessings from this planet. Here is part of my list. Vegetables. Delicious, nutritious vegetables that grow in my husband's garden. Animal companions. Not only the cats who share our home, but also the birds at the feeders, the deer that graze in our yard, the fox that occasionally passes through. Rain. I have loved sitting on the porch to watch and listen to the thunderstorms in the past weeks. It soothes my soul as it quenches the earth. And now, with this flame of hope, shedding light in your heart, what is your list? It's now time for our story for all ages. I invite you to gather round as we hear The First Blade of Sweetgrass, story by Suzanne Greenlaw and Gabriel Frey, illustrations by Nancy Baker. As grandmother's blue truck crested the hill, Moosquin saw the ocean for the first time that day. The water's surface sparkled in the sunlight. "Look, Ukomi, is this where we pick sweetgrass?" Moosquin asked excitedly. "Yes, Moosquin," grandmother said. "Sweetgrass grows in the salt marsh where the river meets the ocean." "My grandmother brought me here when I was a girl. She was my first sweetgrass teacher. Every summer, I would help her pick sweetgrass to weave into her baskets." "Our people have been coming here to pick sweetgrass for generations. We call it Wellamahaskil, and we use it in ceremony as well as baskets. Sweetgrass is spiritual medicine for us." Walking into the marsh, Moosquin saw the grass dance with the wind. All the grasses shone bright against the sun. "Ukomi, how will we tell which grass is sweetgrass?" she asked. "All the grass looks the same." "I'll show you, Tuss," said grandmother, "but then you must try to find it on your own while I pick enough sweetgrass for the baskets I will sell next summer." Grandmother stopped in the shade of a tree and put down their bag. "This is where we'll pick," she said. "It's important to remember that we never pick the first blade of sweetgrass we see. If we never pick the first blade, we will never pick the last one. We must make sure there will be sweetgrass here for the next generation." "Come here, Tuss," grandmother said. "Bend down and look at the grasses closely. Sweetgrass has a shiny green tassel and blades and a purple stem, and it gives itself to you. If you tug lightly on a piece of sweetgrass, it will let go. If you have to pull hard, you are not pulling sweetgrass." "I see it, Ukomi," Moosquin said confidently. "I know how to pick sweetgrass." Moosquin got down on her knees and was enveloped by grass. She could see her grandmother's head through the tips of the tall grass. The air felt cooler close to the ground, and the thin whine of mosquitoes grew distant. Moosquin looked for the purple-stemmed sweetgrass, but all the grasses looked the same. Frustrated, she started to pull at any stem she could reach. Some broke off when she tugged, others pulled out of the soil. Moosquin stood up with a handful of grass. "Ukomi, look at the sweetgrass I picked," she said. Grandmother smiled. "Tuss, that's a good first try, but that's not sweetgrass. I'll show you again." She knelt beside Moosquin and said, "First you have to look at the different grasses and get to know them. Do you see this grass with a thick stalk and a light green color? That's not sweetgrass. This plant has a small white flower. That's not sweetgrass either. Sweetgrass is a shiny emerald green with purple bottom. Sit here and take your time. Your ancestors are here with you. My grandmother is here with you, helping you." Moosquin sat in the cool air and watched the colors of the grass shift with the wind. A large bird flew into the marsh, then glided onto the water. She looked at her grandmother and saw that she had already picked a lot of sweetgrass. Musquan closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother as a little girl in this very same place. She thought about her ancestors here in the marsh. Slowly the smell of sweetgrass drifted by her. It was the same sweet hay smell that was in her grandmother's basket room. Musquan opened her eyes and smiled. In the distance, she could see her ancestors picking sweetgrass in the marsh with her. She looked down at the grasses again. The beautiful emerald green color of sweetgrass popped out from all the other grasses. She could see it. Musquan reached eagerly to pick the first blade of sweetgrass she saw, but then stopped. Remembering her grandmother's words, Musquan reached past the first blade of sweetgrass and tugged lightly on the next one. She felt the roots let go of the soil as the grass gave itself to her hand. "Look, Ukomi, I have sweetgrass," Musquan exclaimed. "Kulikusetus, that's right," grandmother said. "Next, I will teach you how to braid sweetgrass for baskets." Musquan picked while cat's paws of wind chased each other in darker bands on the blue bay. She was excited to get home and show her parents all the sweetgrass she had picked. Perhaps next summer she could teach her younger sister, Alamuset, how to pick sweetgrass. Please remain seated for our musical response, The More We Get Together. Please remain seated for our prayer hymn, number 1011, in the teal hymnal, Return Again. Let us enter into prayer with the words of Anne Mason. Spirit of life, your very presence among us is what gives us connection. Help us to sense that beneath our feet is the strength we need to keep us grounded. Help us to feel that behind our back is the protection we need to feel safe facing our fears. Help us to know that before our eyes lies the beauty we seek to feel astounded. Help us to lift our heads high enough to be aware of the vastness of our sky and of our spirit. And help us to know that within our hearts lies the love we need to complete the circle of connection in our lives. We are grateful, Spirit of love, for this day. May we use all these gifts, our feet, our backs, our eyes, our heads, and our hearts, to bring love into this hurting world, this world which we so value, which we cherish. May it be so, and amen. light a final candle for all that we hold in our hearts. In the words of Kristen Collins, we give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. For those of you watching the service online, you may contribute to a virtual offering plate using the donate button on our website or by mailing a check to the church office. I now invite the ushers forward to pass the offering. Church community and its wider concerns, we give thanks. Here are the words of Peter Morales. What does deep spirituality feel like to you? Spirituality is impossible to define and difficult to describe. For me, it feels like connection. Connection to myself, to others around me, to the earth and all of creation. Connection to myself feels like deep peace, awareness, calm, authenticity. Connection to others feels like compassion, community, acceptance, and enduring love. Spirituality is not an idea, it is an experience. When I experience connection, dividing lines disappear. Inner conflict gives way to integrity. The line that separates my individuality from others fades. We become one. I find connections with my deepest self in times of solitary practice and reflection. I find connection with others in community, often in worship. All the great spiritual traditions teach this. Today, the connection with creation, with the earth and the cosmos, may be the most difficult. We live in artificial, controlled environments that separate us from the natural world. More than humans in any other time, we live separated from the natural world, the world from which we emerged and that sustains our lives. We so very much need to experience our world. We need to let go of controlling our world and allow ourselves to become one with it. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves. May we connect, really connect. When we do, it changes everything. A map of balance and harmony. an excerpt from Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. At the height of the summer, when the days are long and bright, and the thunderers come to soak the ground, the lessons of reciprocity are written clearly in a Three Sisters garden. Together their stems inscribe what looks like to me a blueprint for the world, a map of balance and harmony. The corn stands 8 feet tall. Rippling green ribbons of leaf curl away from the stem in every direction to catch the sun. No leaf sits directly over the next, so that each can gather light without shading the others. The bean twines around the cornstalk, weaving itself between the leaves of corn, never interfering with their work. In the spaces where corn leaves are not, buds appear on the vining bean and expand into outstretched leaves and clusters of fragrant flowers. The bean leaves droop and are held close to the stem of the corn. Spread around the feet of the corn and beans is a carpet of big, broad squash leaves that intercept the light that falls among the pillars of corn. Their layered spacing uses the light, a gift from the sun, efficiently with no waste. The organic symmetry of forms belongs together, the placement of every leaf, the harmony of shapes speak their message. Respect for one another. Respect one another. Support one another. Bring your gift to the world and receive the gifts of others, and there will be enough for us all. Please rise and body your spirit to join our voices in hymn number 1007 in the Teal hymnal, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
Oh, Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Oh, I must be coming through. Everybody's devices operational. You know, religion was never a part of my life. Still isn't really. We Unitarians like to say, or many do, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. How many say that? Yeah. A few months ago, I began wondering, what do we mean by being spiritual? Can I look into your eyes and somehow see that you're spiritual? You know, do you have a ribbon or something that says, or a tattoo? Anyway, I'd like to tell a couple personal stories that, you know, at the time before I was into religion, I've never been into religion, but before I was, I'm not sure if I am spiritual or not. Anyway, experiences that were very, very meaningful and profound to me, and that we can label as being spiritual, or have become spiritual for me. One was back, it goes back 40 years now. I had just divorced unwillingly, unwantingly, from my first wife, and was setting off on a 4-day, 3-night backpacking trek to sort of clear my mind. The location was Olympia National Park, northwest corner of the country there. The trail from Deer Park to Hurricane Ridge is named. It goes along the ridge just at tree line, alpine, tundra above and forest below. As I set out, the fog was so thick. The fog was not part of the plan. But as it turned out, I set out in a fog so thick that I could barely see my feet on the trail. But I slugged along and slogged along and went on hour after hour. And the fog was so dense, as I say, I could barely see my feet on the trail. But at one point, hours into the trip, and it was getting toward late afternoon, the trail dropped down just below, not really below, but at the lower edge of the clouds, mist blowing by. I could see I was at the top of a meadow, trees on either side. A meadow about the size of a football field. It went down. And I was tired, and I looked at the meadow, and there was a level place just down there where the earth had slumped. And I decided to camp. Not legal, but I was tired. I decided to camp. So I set up my tent, and as I set up my tent and prepared things, I saw 2 deer grazing down there at the bottom end of the field. A big, handsome buck and a very beautiful doe. I didn't pay them any attention, and nor did they me. So I slept through the night. The next day remained totally foggy, and rather than going on and getting wet and miserable hiking through the fog, I decided to just stay around my camp and identify wildflowers, which is a passion of mine. I spent the day just, anyway. Whoops. Yeah, can you help me out?
While we're adjusting, can everybody hear Bernie okay? Yeah.
So, the next day was, as I say, was I just stayed around camp and kept dry. And toward evening, late afternoon, I went to fill my canteen from a little trickle that I saw just over the rise there. And well, during the day, I had noticed that the buck had disappeared from the scene, and the doe was grazing further up the field, the meadow toward my tent. But again, I didn't pay much attention. I went to get my water, which was just over a rise there, dipped my canteen filled, and came back. As I stood up, I could hardly believe it. I wouldn't have if anybody told me. But the doe had come up and bedded herself down right beside my tent. And I crawled into my tent. She raised her head and looked at me as I crawled in, and I looked at her, but we didn't. And I felt so comforted that night, lying with her lying beside me, between me and the darkness and all that might lie beyond. And the next morning, the sun was glistening on the tent. Finally, the fog had cleared, and it was promising to be a beautiful day. And the first thing I thought, I wonder if that deer is still there. I zipped down the flaps of my tent and found myself looking straight into her big black eyes as she was looking in on me. I breakfasted, and for the day, the circuit hike I had planned was out of the question since I spent the day in camp. So I just left my camp in place and took a long walk down the valley and back again, wondering if she'd still be there when I got back. She was right in the middle of my camp, between my tent and my cook stove. But she hadn't touched a thing. She hadn't snagged a tent string or everything. And she slept the second night with me as she had the first. And the next morning we had to part ways. I had to go back to my world and she back to hers. But what she had left me with was just profound. You know, I'd gone into the wilderness and I had been accepted, watched over, and cared for. I can't describe the euphoria that I felt. Anyway, later I described that story to a naturalist, and he said, the deer was looking for protection from you, too. How so? Me protecting the deer? I said, yeah, if a big bear comes along, the deer knows it can run faster than you. But anyway, but that doesn't matter, you know? So the natural explanation doesn't matter. To me, it was my experience. You know, as I say, to me, I've been taught that I'd walked into the wilderness and been accepted, watched over, and cared for. And that stayed with me. You know, I still sometimes, often think of the deer going to sleep, and it gives me comfort, you know. Okay. So that's become, you know, at the time I wasn't into spirituality, but it's become a very spiritual experience, if we can define it that way. I was glad to hear that story, or that reading, that spirituality has to be defined by each person. I'd like to have a workshop come fall of discussing spirituality, what it means to us, each of us, and I guess there is, I don't know if there is a common denominator. Anyway, second story. Very simple little story. I was in Blackwater Wildlife Refuge, driving along, and I saw a snowy egret by a little pond there, beautiful photograph. I got out, stopped the car and got out. And as I got out, there was a Delmarva squirrel sitting by the trunk of a tree there. The Delmarva squirrel is a very special species, unique to the Delmarva Peninsula. It's like a gray squirrel, but it's big. It's about the size of a rabbit. Anyway, I saw it, and somehow the squirrel indicated to me that it wanted to cross the road. And it was Saturday afternoon with a fair flow of traffic, and the squirrel was like rightfully scared of crossing the road. So I stepped out in the road and stopped the traffic and assured the squirrel how to cross the road. You know, I wonder about the driver of that car, you know, stopped to have a squirrel cross the road. But there's something there, you know. The squirrel spoke to me, I spoke to the squirrel, and we communicated. Body language. Body language is universal among all mammalian species, I think. Anyway, what do we do with this? So those are spiritual experiences, but you know, do you have to wait for very unique, once in a million year experience to be spiritual? Braiding Sweetgrass gave me a clue. That saying thank you to the trees, the flowers, the sky, the clouds, the sun. You know, often things of beauty catch our eyes. Coming into the church, I saw some unique lily flowers that I'd never seen before. Some new species of some sort. You gotta have a moment of elation and cheer for seeing that. Say thank you to it. Now that sounds silly, you know. If you say thank you to every little thing that strikes you, I mean, that's just plain silly. From the Braiding Sweetgrass, the elder Native American said, you don't need to say it from here. Say it from here, and they'll hear you. So yeah, thank you. And then I read the Church of the Wild, another little book here. And she tells many stories, and she had a deer experience, not dissimilar from mine, much more prolonged and profound perhaps, but anyway. She did some research, and she looked into the origin of the translation of the first chapter of the book of John in the New Testament. And, you know, it's translated by the church as, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. She discovered that the translation came to be translated as Word, which is very authoritarian and dictatorial. The proper translation should be conversation. And what a difference that makes. Read it again using conversation. In the beginning was the conversation. And the conversation was with God. And the conversation was God. Totally different meaning. gets away from all the dictatorial authoritarianism and gets straight to what spirituality is about. It's about conversation. And coming back to the idea of saying thank you. You know, if you look at a beautiful flower and say, oh, that's a beautiful flower, the flower is still on one side and you're on the other. Isn't that a beautiful flower? If you say thank you to the flower for giving me that moment of pleasure, that beauty, you're suddenly there with the flower. Saying thank you opens up the door for conversation, and you can immediately become connected. So that's basically the essence of my talk this morning. Have more conversation with nature and find yourself becoming part of nature through the conversation. At the beginning, in the beginning was conversation, and the conversation was with God, and the conversation was God. I wonder what that would do. You know, the Native Americans, they're called primitive. They didn't have technology. One thing they had was sustainability, which we're on the verge of falling over the cliff because we don't. So I wonder what would happen if we became more conversant with nature, saying thank you to the clouds, the blue sky, the flowers, the trees for their oxygen, for their food, for their shade, for their everything. They really are the center of life. So thank you to all of nature, beauty, and thank you to all of you for being here today and sharing this with me.
Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 354 in the great hymnal, We Laugh, We Cry, verses 1 and 4.
Thank you.
May you never thirst. May your body and your spirit always have what they need. When you are in need of refreshment or new life, may the waters be available to you. May you never know thirst unto death in your body or in your soul. May you never thirst. And may your body and your spirit always thirst enough to stay alive. May you know the dissatisfaction with things as they are that leads to work for justice. May you know the thirst for new knowledge that leads to the quest for truth. May you know the desire for spiritual thirst that keeps the soul searching and gives the sweetness of new discovery to faithful followers of spiritual paths of all kinds. May you never thirst too deeply, but may your thirst never be entirely quenched. Go in peace, and amen.